The Battle of Actium represents a pivotal moment in ancient Roman history, a culmination of years of political tension and power struggle that would ultimately reshape the Mediterranean world. At its core, this was a dramatic confrontation between two formidable leaders: Octavian, the young and ambitious heir of Julius Caesar, and Mark Antony, a seasoned military commander who had aligned himself with the legendary Egyptian queen Cleopatra. The conflict emerged from the complex political landscape following Julius Caesar's assassination in 44 BCE. The Roman Republic was in a state of constant turbulence, with various powerful figures competing for supremacy. Initially, Octavian, Caesar's adopted son and primary heir, formed an uneasy alliance with Mark Antony and another prominent leader, Lepidus, creating the Second Triumvirate. However, this political partnership was inherently unstable and fraught with personal ambitions and mutual distrust. As years passed, the relationship between Octavian and Mark Antony deteriorated dramatically. Antony had become deeply entangled with Cleopatra, the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic Kingdom of Egypt. Their relationship was not just romantic but also political, with Antony spending increasing amounts of time in Alexandria and seemingly becoming more aligned with Egyptian interests than Roman ones. This perceived betrayal was a source of significant tension and propaganda for Octavian, who portrayed Antony as having abandoned Roman values and become a puppet of a foreign queen. Octavian skillfully used this narrative to turn Roman public opinion against Antony. He presented himself as the defender of traditional Roman values, while casting Antony as a traitor who had essentially surrendered his Roman identity to foreign influences. The propaganda war was intense, with each side attempting to delegitimize the other and gain support from the Roman Senate and people. The conflict ultimately culminated in the Battle of Actium, which would be far more than a mere military engagement. This naval battle represented the final confrontation between two competing visions for the future of Rome: Octavian's path of centralized imperial power versus Antony and Cleopatra's more multicultural, Eastern-influenced approach to governance. This battle was not just a personal conflict but a turning point that would determine the fundamental structure of Roman political power. The stakes were nothing less than the future governance of the known world. Would Rome continue as a republican system with distributed power, or would it transform into a centralized empire ruled by a single powerful leader? The Battle of Actium thus stands as a critical moment of transition, marking the end of the Roman Republic and ushering in the Roman Empire. Octavian's victory would lead to his transformation into Augustus, the first Roman emperor, fundamentally altering the political, social, and cultural landscape of the Mediterranean world for centuries to come. This momentous clash represented more than a military victory. It was a watershed moment that would define the trajectory of Western civilization for generations, symbolizing the shift from a complex republican system to a more centralized, imperial model of governance. The Battle of Actium took place in the waters of the Ambracian Gulf, off the western coast of Greece, near the promontory of Actium in 31 BCE. This strategic location was crucial for both forces, as it provided a natural harbor and excellent positioning for naval warfare. The promontory of Actium itself featured a sanctuary of Apollo, which would later become symbolically significant in Octavian's victory narrative. The opposing forces were impressive in scale, though significantly mismatched in numbers. Octavian's fleet, commanded by his skilled general Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa, consisted of approximately 400 ships. These vessels were primarily lighter Liburnian galleys, known for their superior maneuverability and speed. Octavian's ships, though smaller, were crewed by experienced sailors and marine infantry who had extensive training in naval warfare tactics. In contrast, Mark Antony's fleet numbered around 230 ships, but what his force lacked in quantity, it attempted to compensate for in size and power. His vessels were predominantly larger quinquiremes and other heavy warships, some reaching massive proportions. These ships were essentially floating fortresses, equipped with towers for artillery and featuring multiple banks of rowers. The larger size of Antony's ships came with a significant drawback. They were slower and less maneuverable than Octavian's lighter vessels. Antony's fleet was supplemented by Cleopatra's Egyptian squadron, which included her personal flagship and royal barge. His ships were crewed by a mixture of Egyptian sailors and Roman marines, along with troops from various client kingdoms of the East. The heavy ships carried larger complements of soldiers, as Antony's strategy relied more on boarding actions and close-quarter combat rather than naval maneuvering. The geographical setting of the battle would prove crucial to its outcome. The confined waters of the Ambracian Gulf limited the effectiveness of Antony's larger vessels, while favoring Octavian's more agile ships. The prevailing winds and currents in the area would also play a significant role in the battle's development, particularly during Cleopatra's famous retreat and the subsequent chaos that ensued among Antony's forces. The stark contrast between the two fleets reflected the broader strategic philosophies of their commanders. Octavian's emphasis on efficiency and mobility versus Antony's reliance on power and intimidation. This fundamental difference would prove decisive in the eventual outcome of this historic naval engagement. The initial phase of the Battle of Actium demonstrated Antony's apparent tactical advantage, creating a compelling narrative of what appeared to be an imminent victory. In the early hours of the engagement, Antony's massive warships dominated the battlefield, their sheer size and power creating an intimidating presence on the waters of the Ambracian Gulf. Antony's larger vessels, particularly his quinquiremes, towered over Octavian's smaller ships like floating fortresses. These behemoth warships were equipped with massive wooden towers that provided elevated positions for archers and artillery. The height advantage allowed Antony's forces to rain down arrows, javelins, and other projectiles onto the decks of Octavian's vessels with devastating effect. The larger ships also carried catapults that could launch heavy stones and incendiary materials, causing significant damage to the lighter craft of Octavian's fleet. The initial clashes favored Antony's strategy of close-quarter combat. When his massive ships managed to engage Octavian's vessels, their superior size and higher freeboard made them extremely difficult to board, while their own marines could more easily leap down onto the enemy decks. The wooden towers on Antony's ships essentially functioned as mobile fortifications, providing his troops with excellent defensive positions and commanding views of the battlefield. Furthermore, Antony's ships demonstrated remarkable resilience in the early stages of the battle. Their thick wooden hulls could withstand significant punishment from ramming attacks, which was a standard naval warfare tactic of the time. Octavian's lighter vessels found their rams less effective against these reinforced hulls, often causing minimal damage while risking damage to their own ships in the process. The weight and size of Antony's ships also provided stability in combat, allowing his artillery to maintain more accurate fire even in the midst of battle. His larger vessels could absorb considerable damage while remaining operational, whereas Octavian's lighter ships were more vulnerable to significant damage from single hits. However, this early advantage would prove to be deceptive. The very features that gave Antony's fleet its initial superiority, the size and weight of his ships, would later contribute to their undoing. The larger vessels required more crew to operate, consumed more resources, and most crucially, were slower and less maneuverable. As the battle progressed, these limitations would become increasingly apparent, setting the stage for the dramatic turn of events that would follow. The early success of Antony's fleet also led to a degree of overconfidence among his commanders and troops, perhaps contributing to the eventual breakdown in discipline when the tide of battle turned. This initial advantage, while impressive, would ultimately prove insufficient to secure victory in one of history's most consequential naval engagements. The pivotal moment of the Battle of Actium came in a dramatic and unexpected turn of events that would forever change the course of Roman history. As the battle raged into the afternoon, Cleopatra, who had been observing the conflict from her royal flagship, made a decision that would prove catastrophic for Antony's forces and their shared cause. With the winds freshening favorably, Cleopatra suddenly ordered her squadron of 60 Egyptian ships to break through the battle line. Her purple sails were unfurled, and her flagship, accompanied by her treasure ships laden with Egyptian wealth, drove through the gap in the fighting. This unexpected maneuver caught both sides by surprise. The Egyptian vessels, taking advantage of the afternoon breeze, rapidly sailed south toward the Peloponnese, leaving the battle behind in a swift and decisive retreat. The psychological impact of this withdrawal was devastating. When Mark Antony observed Cleopatra's departure, he made what would prove to be a fatal decision. Instead of maintaining command of his forces, he transferred to a faster quinquireme and pursued Cleopatra's flagship, abandoning his troops and ships in the heat of battle. This action by their commander created a catastrophic crisis of leadership and morale among his forces. The effect on Antony's troops was immediate and profound. The sight of their commander pursuing Cleopatra's retreating ships triggered widespread confusion and panic. The carefully maintained battle formation began to disintegrate as ship captains and their crews, suddenly finding themselves without clear leadership or direction, faced a terrible decision: whether to continue fighting or attempt to flee. Octavian's forces, led by the brilliant tactician Agrippa, quickly recognized and exploited this chaos. They launched an aggressive assault against the now disorganized enemy fleet. The larger, heavier ships of Antony's force, already at a disadvantage in terms of maneuverability, became even more vulnerable as their formation collapsed. Many of Antony's ships were surrounded and attacked from multiple directions by Octavian's more agile vessels. The breakdown in command structure led to a complete collapse of coordination among Antony's remaining forces. Some ships attempted to flee, while others continued fighting in isolated groups without any coherent strategy. This disarray made them easy targets for Octavian's well-disciplined fleet. The fighting devolved into a series of uncoordinated skirmishes, with Antony's forces being systematically overwhelmed and destroyed. Fire became a devastating weapon in this phase of the battle. Octavian's ships launched burning projectiles onto the decks of Antony's larger vessels, which, due to their size and reduced crew numbers, found it increasingly difficult to combat the flames while simultaneously defending against attacks. Many ships were burned or scuttled, their crews jumping into the sea to escape the inferno. By sunset, the outcome was decisive. Thousands of Antony's sailors and marines were dead or captured. Many of his ships were burned, sunk, or seized by Octavian's forces. Those who survived either surrendered or managed to escape, but Antony's naval power was effectively destroyed. The battle that had begun with Antony holding an apparent advantage had turned into a complete rout. This turning point not only decided the immediate outcome of the battle but effectively ended the civil war. Cleopatra's retreat and Antony's decision to follow her transformed what might have been a contested battle into an overwhelming victory for Octavian. The aftermath would see both Antony and Cleopatra flee to Egypt, where their tragic end would play out in the following months, while Octavian emerged as the undisputed master of the Roman world. The aftermath of the Battle of Actium culminated in one of history's most famous tragic endings, as both Mark Antony and Cleopatra chose to end their lives rather than face capture and humiliation at the hands of Octavian. The events that unfolded in Alexandria during 30 BCE would become legendary, captivating audiences for millennia to come. Following their defeat at Actium, Antony and Cleopatra fled to Alexandria, Egypt's capital and Cleopatra's seat of power. Their arrival was marked by despair and isolation, as former allies quickly abandoned their cause in favor of the victorious Octavian. The couple's once mighty position had crumbled, and they found themselves increasingly cornered as Octavian's forces methodically advanced toward Egypt. In the months following Actium, Antony attempted to mount a defense of Egypt, but his remaining forces were demoralized and largely ineffective. His support continued to erode as more loyalists defected to Octavian's side. The psychological impact of the defeat weighed heavily on Antony, who reportedly withdrew into periods of deep depression, a stark contrast to his former character as a charismatic military leader. The final act began when Octavian's armies reached Alexandria in the summer of 30 BCE. Despite some initial resistance, it became clear that the city would fall. According to historical accounts, Antony experienced a momentary surge of his old military spirit and led a cavalry charge against Octavian's forces. However, this last show of defiance proved futile, and upon returning to Alexandria, he received false news that Cleopatra had already taken her life. Devastated by this report, Antony chose to die by his own hand. He fell on his sword in the traditional Roman manner, a final act maintaining his identity as a Roman soldier. However, he did not die immediately. Learning that Cleopatra was actually still alive and had secluded herself in her mausoleum, he asked to be carried to her. Historical accounts describe how he was hoisted up the walls of the mausoleum, as Cleopatra had barred the doors, fearing capture. There, in Cleopatra's arms, Antony drew his last breath. Cleopatra's end came shortly after, though the exact circumstances remain shrouded in both history and legend. After attempting to negotiate with Octavian, she realized that she would be taken to Rome as a prisoner, to be paraded through the streets as a trophy of war. Rather than face such humiliation, she chose to end her life. The traditional account, as reported by ancient historians, states that she died by the bite of an asp, a venomous snake smuggled into her chambers in a basket of figs. The details of Cleopatra's death have been debated by historians, but what is certain is that she was found dead, along with 2 of her faithful servants, in her royal quarters. Octavian, despite his desire to display her in his triumph, was left only with her corpse. According to her wishes, she was buried alongside Antony, though the location of their tomb remains unknown to this day. Their deaths mark the definitive end of both the Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt and the Hellenistic age. Cleopatra was the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt, and with her death, Egypt became a province of Rome. The end of these 2 legendary figures also symbolized the final transition from the Roman Republic to the Roman Empire, as Octavian, soon to become Augustus, stood unopposed as the most powerful man in the Mediterranean world. The suicides of Antony and Cleopatra have captured the imagination of writers, artists, and dramatists through the ages, most famously in Shakespeare's play. Their tragic end represented more than just personal defeat. It marked the end of an era and the birth of a new political order that would shape the Mediterranean world for centuries to come. The transformation of Octavian into Augustus and the establishment of the Roman Empire represents one of history's most remarkable political metamorphoses. Following his victory at Actium and the subsequent deaths of Antony and Cleopatra, Octavian masterfully converted his military supremacy into lasting political authority, fundamentally reshaping the Roman world. Upon returning to Rome in 29 BCE, Octavian faced a delicate situation. He needed to consolidate his power while avoiding the appearance of establishing a monarchy, which Romans traditionally despised. His solution was brilliant in its subtlety. Rather than declaring himself dictator or king, he carefully constructed a facade of republican restoration while simultaneously accumulating unprecedented personal authority. In January 27 BCE, Octavian executed a carefully choreographed political performance. In a dramatic session of the Senate, he announced his intention to restore the Republic and surrender his extraordinary powers. The Senate, now largely composed of his supporters, responded by insisting that he retain certain powers for the good of the state. It was during this session that they bestowed upon him the honorific title Augustus, meaning revered one or elevated one, marking his transformation from Octavian to the figure history would remember as Augustus. Augustus's new political system, later termed the Principate, was a masterpiece of constitutional fiction. While maintaining the outward forms of the Republic, the Senate continued to meet, elections were still held, and Republican offices remained. Real power was concentrated in his hands through a combination of official positions and unofficial influence. He held the title of Princeps, first citizen, commanded the loyalty of the armies as imperator, and possessed tribunician power, giving him vast civil authority. The establishment of the Pax Romana, Roman peace, was perhaps Augustus's greatest achievement. This unprecedented period of stability and prosperity lasted approximately 2 centuries and transformed the Mediterranean world. The Pax Romana was characterized by systematic road construction. Augustus initiated massive infrastructure projects, connecting the empire with an extensive network of roads that facilitated trade, communication, and military movement. Standardized currency. The establishment of a uniform monetary system throughout the empire promoted commerce and economic integration. Professional civil service. Augustus created an efficient administrative system, with a professional bureaucracy managing the empire's vast territories. Military reforms. He reorganized the Roman military into a standing professional army, with fixed terms of service and regular pay, establishing frontier defenses that would last for centuries. Cultural flowering. The Augustan age saw a remarkable flourishing of literature, architecture, and art, with poets like Virgil and Horace creating works that would become classics of Western civilization. Urban development. Augustus famously claimed he found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble, implementing massive building programs that transformed the capital and other major cities. Religious revival. He promoted traditional Roman religious values and practices while simultaneously allowing himself to be worshipped as a divine figure in the eastern provinces. The success of Augustus's new system was demonstrated by its longevity. The basic framework he established would govern the Roman Empire for centuries. He solved the chronic political instability that had plagued the late Republic by creating a system that concentrated power in a single individual while maintaining enough traditional elements to satisfy conservative sensibilities. Augustus's rule marked the beginning of the Roman Empire's golden age. Trade flourished, cities grew, and Roman culture spread throughout the Mediterranean basin and beyond. The system he created was so effective that it survived several incompetent or tyrannical successors without fundamental damage to its basic structure. The transformation from republic to empire under Augustus represents one of history's most successful political revolutions. By combining military might with political acumen, he created a system that would govern much of the known world for centuries. The Pax Romana he established would become synonymous with civilization itself, creating a model of universal empire that would influence political thinking for millennia to come. The Battle of Actium's impact on Mediterranean control was profound and far-reaching, fundamentally altering the political, economic, and cultural landscape of the ancient world. Octavian's victory established Roman dominance over the Mediterranean Sea in a way that had never before been achieved, creating what historians would later call a Mediterranean lake under Roman control. The immediate consequence of Actium was the complete elimination of rival naval powers in the Mediterranean. With the destruction of Antony and Cleopatra's combined fleet, no significant maritime force remained to challenge Roman supremacy. This naval dominance had several crucial implications. Maritime trade control. Rome gained unprecedented control over Mediterranean shipping routes, allowing them to regulate and tax maritime commerce throughout the region. The elimination of piracy and the establishment of standardized trading practices led to an economic boom. Merchants could now transport goods safely across vast distances, knowing they were protected by Roman naval patrols. This security led to the development of extensive trade networks connecting Spain, North Africa, Egypt, and the eastern provinces. Strategic resource management. Octavian's victory gave Rome direct control over Egypt, the empire's breadbasket. The Egyptian grain supply, crucial for feeding Rome's growing population, was now secured under direct imperial administration. This control over vital resources extended to other strategic materials such as timber from Asia Minor, metals from Spain, and luxury goods from the East. Cultural integration. The unified Mediterranean basin under Roman control facilitated unprecedented cultural exchange. Greek, Egyptian, and Eastern influences flowed freely throughout the empire, creating a cosmopolitan civilization that combined elements from various Mediterranean cultures. This cultural synthesis would define the Roman world for centuries to come. Military strategic advantage. Control of the Mediterranean allowed Rome to deploy forces rapidly across the empire. The sea became a highway for Roman legions, enabling quick responses to any threats or rebellions. This mobility was crucial for maintaining stability across vast territories. Administrative efficiency. The Mediterranean's unity under Roman control allowed for the development of sophisticated administrative systems. A network of ports, warehouses, and administrative centers facilitated efficient governance. Communication between provinces improved dramatically, enabling better coordination of imperial policies. Economic integration. The creation of a single economic zone around the Mediterranean led to unprecedented prosperity. Local economies became integrated into a larger imperial system, with specialized production regions developing to serve empire-wide markets. This economic integration created wealth and stability throughout the region. Urbanization and development. The security and prosperity brought by Roman control led to significant urban development around the Mediterranean coast. New ports were constructed, existing cities expanded, and Roman architectural and engineering expertise spread throughout the region. Religious and philosophical exchange. The unified Mediterranean facilitated the spread of religious and philosophical ideas. This would later prove crucial for the spread of Christianity and other religious movements throughout the Roman world. Technological advancement. Maritime technology and engineering saw significant advancement under Roman control. Improved ship designs, harbor facilities, and navigation techniques developed to serve the empire's needs. Social mobility. The unified Mediterranean created opportunities for social advancement. Merchants, administrators, and skilled workers could find opportunities throughout the empire, leading to social mobility on an unprecedented scale. The long-term implications of this Mediterranean control were equally significant. Lasting peace. The Pax Romana, enabled by this complete control of the Mediterranean, created the longest period of peace the region had ever known. Infrastructure legacy. The ports, roads, and urban centers developed during this period created an infrastructure network that would survive long after the empire's fall. Cultural heritage. The Mediterranean unity under Rome created a shared cultural heritage that would influence European, North African, and Middle Eastern civilizations for millennia. Linguistic impact. Latin and Greek became lingua francas throughout the Mediterranean, facilitating communication and cultural exchange. Legal framework. Roman law and administrative practices spread throughout the Mediterranean, creating legal and governmental traditions that would influence future civilizations. Octavian's victory at Actium thus represented more than just a military triumph. It was the foundation for a new world order centered on the Mediterranean. This unified Mediterranean system would prove remarkably durable, creating patterns of trade, communication, and cultural exchange that would persist long after the Roman Empire itself had fallen. The significance of this Mediterranean control cannot be overstated. It fundamentally shaped the development of Western civilization and created lasting impacts that can still be felt today. The historical legacy and importance of the Battle of Actium extends far beyond its immediate military outcome, representing a crucial turning point that fundamentally altered the course of Western civilization. This pivotal engagement marked not just the end of one era but the birth of another, with repercussions that would echo through millennia of human history. The battle definitively concluded the Roman Republic's final civil war, bringing to an end a political system that had governed Rome for nearly 5 centuries. The republican system, with its checks and balances, annual magistracies, and collective leadership, had become increasingly dysfunctional during its final decades. Actium represented the last gasp of the republican order, as the old political framework proved incapable of managing an empire that had grown far beyond its original design. The victory at Actium cleared the path for Octavian's transformation into Augustus and the establishment of the Roman Empire. This new political system would prove remarkably durable, governing the Mediterranean world for centuries. The Augustan settlement created a model of imperial rule that would influence political thinking well into modern times, inspiring later empires and political systems. The battle's influence on culture and literature was immense. Roman poets like Virgil and Horace immortalized the victory in their works, creating a narrative that would shape historical memory. The battle became a symbol of West triumphing over East, order over chaos, and restraint over excess. These themes would resonate throughout Western literature and art for centuries to come. The battle site at Actium became a place of commemoration, with Augustus establishing the city of Nicopolis, Victory City, nearby. Archaeological remains from this period continue to provide insights into the battle and its commemoration. The Victory Monument at Actium became a model for later triumphant monuments throughout history. The battle demonstrated the importance of naval warfare in ancient Mediterranean politics and led to significant developments in naval technology and tactics. The success of Agrippa's lighter, more maneuverable ships influenced naval design and strategy for generations. The aftermath of Actium saw the creation of a unified Mediterranean economic zone under Roman control. This led to unprecedented economic growth and prosperity, establishing patterns of trade and commerce that would persist for centuries. The victory was interpreted in religious terms, with Augustus promoting Apollo as his patron deity. This religious dimension of imperial power would become a crucial aspect of Roman imperial ideology, influencing later concepts of divine kingship. The Battle of Actium serves as a compelling reminder of how single events can fundamentally reshape human society. Today's readers can draw several important lessons from this historic encounter. The contrasting styles of Octavian and Antony demonstrate how leadership decisions can have far-reaching consequences. Success often depends on the ability to adapt to changing circumstances, as shown by Octavian's political transformation after victory. The Roman Republic's failure to adapt to new conditions led to its collapse, highlighting the importance of institutional flexibility. The unified Mediterranean under Roman rule demonstrates how political stability can foster economic and cultural development. Understanding pivotal moments like Actium helps us better comprehend current political and social dynamics. The Battle of Actium stands as one of history's decisive moments, marking the transition from one form of government to another and establishing patterns that would influence civilization for millennia. Its study offers valuable insights into leadership, political transformation, and the complex interplay of military, political, and cultural forces in shaping human society. Understanding this pivotal battle and its consequences helps us better comprehend not only the past but also the present, as many of the political, social, and cultural dynamics it exemplified continue to influence our world today. The legacy of Actium reminds us that historical events, though distant in time, can continue to shape our understanding of power, leadership, and social change in the modern world.